Many publishers do many games, and it's just like, it's like throwing darts on a wall, where you check out what sticks, and the rest is...
I knew CGE from like working with different individuals at shows and seeing them at shows and seeing kind of how CGE did things differently than everyone else in the industry. And that was kind of what I honed in on, is that Czech Games Edition takes things at a different pace than a lot of the different companies that I'd worked for and everything. And so it was refreshing to see the focus on the gamers and like the games themselves.
After the initial unexpected success of their first 3 games, Czech Games Edition continued to focus on producing just 1 or 2 games per year. They branched out to experiment with other completely new types of games, which gradually informed the CGE identity. The long development process for their games, the exploration of new mechanics and themes, but also adopting a distinct style in the graphics and the art, as well as the rulebooks. The big release of 2009 was Dungeon Lords, and its theme was inspired by a popular video game of the time.
Not only we were avid board gamers, but also video gamers. And one of the very cute video game, Dungeon Keeper, where like it twists this idea of like, instead of being a hero, you know, going through the dungeons, looting, you are actually the manager of the dungeon, and the heroes, the so-called heroes, are robbing it out.
I remember how the main action selection mechanics was created.
This was the first prototype. I had different
mechanics.
It was worker placement, rather generic, but there was some twist to it. But the game was too long, so I changed it to this mechanics. That is basically what's in the game now, and then played with the same people and asked them how it was, and they said, "Yeah, that was much better. It was faster and more interesting." I said, "Oh, actually, you are playing 15 minutes longer than last time, but it is good that you felt it is shorter because it was more intense and everyone was playing at the same time, and there was much less downtime. So that was different between these 2 versions of Dungeon Lords."
But Dirk started a story, or this story, with the graphics, because I think CG was one of the pioneers of like really beautiful, high quality production graphics in the games. Nowadays it's kind of standard, especially with Kickstarters and all that stuff. Before, you know, all these German board games, they were kind of boring looking, you know, always the same crude art, in my opinion anyway. And I remember that we wanted to make something different, make something beautiful with this game, something that would capture the silly nature of this game. And that year I brought from SN Giants, which is a game which was, I think, maybe the first game drawn by now really famous Miguel Coimbra. So what happened, Vlaada then created a brief, and we sent it to both Miguel Coimbra and David Cochard, who is, or Cochard, how he is supposed to be pronounced, I think, the French guy, author of the Merry Men of Sherwood graphics. And well, Miguel Coimbra said, "Hey, awesome game, but I'm booked for 2 years." And David Cochard said, "Awesome, I love it, let's do this." And he sent us immediately drawing of an imp.
That iconic image when imp is holding a bag over his shoulder and so on, and we were sold immediately. It was like, yeah, this was perfect.
So we contracted him. He's French artist, which says a lot. And you know, he's also like, he fits in CGE because he doesn't also care about timeline, or in his, well, he does, but he never manages to fulfill on time because he just loves to finish things.
And I remember actually drawing, sketching these characters like pen on paper, basically, just these ideas, and then scanning it and send it to Vlaada, who then sent it to David, who was painting it. So this was like, and I actually remember this pretty well because it was during summer like this, and we were on our cottage where I had no equipment, so that's why I was drawing it with my pen on a paper. and then actually I think even maybe using a fax machine to send it over, because there was no email, nothing. So it was quite like partisan style production. Yeah.
And I was really afraid that we will not sell enough copies to actually pay off the investment which we did into graphics with David. But for some reason, Dungeon Lords that year, some rankings on Board Game Geek at the time, became #1 game from SN that year. And that helped a lot because word spread out significantly. Also, we got more and more partners who were doing other languages than just English, German, French, Czech, but many more became norm for us. And because of that, we were actually able to make enough copies, and in the end, it was success. But I was really afraid that it was too complex and it will not be accepted well. But I can see that actually the illustrations from David brought a lot of people to this game. And because of those illustrations, it was possible for us to make a bigger hit with this game than without them.
It has all this silliness in the illustrations and all those colors and all those little like jokes in the illustrations and the texts, and that's what I believe it makes the CGE game mostly. I mean, it definitely Vlaada's games, but for a long time it was like almost a CGE game. Yeah.
I kind of like that. I love the unique feel of it. The fact that you're the bad guys. It was a cute rule book. You know, it was a funny-ish rule book, and a very meaty game. And it was just, a lot of cool things that were happening. And that I was like, okay, that one I'm interested in. And I don't know if anybody else was, but they awarded me, they remembered me, I guess, from last year, and we talked and everything. And they said, sure, you got it. And that was my first big success with them. And I remember bringing, I think, a palette to BGG Con, which is right after SN, and I sold the whole palette at BGG Con, which was great. And at that point, it was a 500-person show or something like that, 600-person show, and I sold about 150 copies of the game. Amazing, really great.
Also the rules. I mean, have you read the rules to Dungeon Lords? They're amazingly written. And we keep doing this, where that's mostly Jason Holt who writes our rules, or who frequently helps us write our rules. There's this fun, the rules are simultaneously funny, they have jokes in them, they're structured as something that makes sense, but at the same time they're very clear and, comprehensive, and you can very much understand them.
Remember Dungeon Lords being tested? It was amazing because I was just we lived in Jordan for a while, and the guys just managed to send me one of the first copies so I could take it with me to Jordan, and we kept playing it there, and it was so much fun even to have this just fresh game out of print, and I felt so privileged to have it.
Maybe sometimes you see a game that I don't know where's the big innovation. But always thought an idea flowing in, it is always there. And most times it paid out. I mean, there's very few game companies I know which have such a high success rate on games.
While that was true, this sadly was not so much the case with the party game Travelogue.
To me, that was, I think, Vlaada's first foray into a non-gamer or a casual gamer type thing, I should say, more mass market thing. And I didn't play the game or anything like that, but I'm like, okay, sure, I'll try it. I'll pick it up. I was a partner with CGE, and I said, it's Vlaada. I said, sure, I'll do it, without really knowing the game much. But it just was not successful, at least not on my end. I don't know how well they did with it, but it met with no fanfare or anything. And I honestly don't know why. I don't even remember many reviews of it or anything like that. It just didn't work. That's it, for whatever reason. But I was hoping, I was betting on it. I said, oh, this could be the thing that will get everybody into it. But I was like 1 or 2 games short. It was Codenames. That was the big hit, not the travel blog.
Indeed, the big hit on the market came 5 years after Travelblog with Codenames, but there's a lot more games in between that paved the way to it. And the Dungeon Lords universe had more things to offer with a new standalone game by Vlaada.
I would like to create a game about where you have some entities but you don't control them. Then act on your own and you just have to manage them, yeah? Somehow. And at the same time, this was the first game I was created with particular artist in my mind, because I was pretty sure that David Cochard will be great with to draw these little guys you are taking care of. And at the same time, this was the game I was creating the way that I hope my wife will like this, and she helped me a lot, because originally there was some. I am not very good at practical stuff, so I was creating some weird system of turning, covering wheels and so on, and she said, "Hey, give it to me." They took some nail and hammer and created this rotating pets for me.
We were so thrilled to work with David that we wanted to do something else with him. And this project was just, especially Vlaada having 3 children, managing the family, and that influenced him a lot. And I can tell you right now I have small kids and I can relate. Like now I can much more appreciate all the unpredictability and chaos of Dungeon Petz. Like you want them to do this and they do something else and you have to or like kind of adjust. Mm-hmm. And working with David was awesome. Like, you know, he created all these different monsters. So it was much more fluid cooperation, and I think the art turned really great thanks to it.
I mean, it's gorgeous.
I mean, yes. And the poop and suffering is of the pets, it's iconic.
I have played so many CGE games over the years. I could probably tell a bunch of stories about a lot of them, but the one that really stands out to me the most has to do with Dungeon Petz, which has got to be one of my favorite CGE games of all time. Just one of my favorite games of all time, quite frankly. And here's the deal. When I first moved to Malta, I was going to be on my own for a couple of months. My wife was still staying behind in England, cleaning up our life. So for a little while, I was kind of doing the bachelor pad thing. I was actually living with several of my co-workers who had all moved to Malta at the same time for this startup company we were all at. And it was at this time that I was still just starting out with my Rahdo Runs Through channel. I'd only done a few videos, and I often found myself with lots of time to kill, so I figured, hey, why don't I film a run-through of Dungeon Petz one afternoon? And I just sat down and did it at a coffee table, and one of my temporary roommates at the time, Jen, who was an animator at the company I was at, she was kind of watching me and afterwards said, "What did you just do? Why did you just film yourself with a phone for an hour playing? What is this thing even? I don't understand." And I tried to explain it, but, you know, I mean, Jen was very much in the, well, you mean like, it's like Monopoly kind of phase, right? When I tried to explain what, you know, modern designer board games were. And I said, well, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Do you want to try it? And I instantly regretted saying that because she said, sure, yeah, let's do it. And if there's one thing people don't call Dungeon Petz, it's a gateway game. And yet I had decided to use it with Jen, not my wife Jen, but my coworker Jen. And so we sat down for the next couple of hours on this epic playthrough. She had never played anything other than Sorry and Yahtzee and stuff like that. But I would have to say it is a testament to one of the most brilliant things about Czech Games Edition games. I don't think gets anywhere near enough credit. The way that they move and combine storytelling and world setting into their gameplay mechanisms. It's actually a surprisingly easy game to teach if you don't worry about, you know, phases and simultaneous worker placement, deployment, and stuff like that, but you just tell the story. If that's how you teach the game, I was very surprised to find that afternoon that somebody who had absolutely no experience with board gaming at all was able to pick up and play one of the toughest, crunchiest games that has ever come out. And I still look back and I wonder if all these years later, if Jen is still a gamer geek, if she says, yeah, my gateway was totally Dungeon Petz.
That same year, CG released Last Will, a worker placement Euro with a very unique theme where players compete who will splurge most extravagantly to earn an inheritance.
Last Will was the game where we first, I think, really utilized Franda Horálek. And I think it was second game we produced, or third game we produced maybe with Vlaada Suchy. We don't mention him too much because he's not part of the company, obviously, but he is definitely an essential centerpiece of CG design, because ever since Galaxy Tracker, we were bringing second game usually, which was from him. It started with League of Six, then 20th Century, and then Last Will, I think.
After Bunny Bunny Moose Moose and Travelblog, Vlaada brought in more designs of light, non-gamer games, this time about drawing.
I always loved drawing games since I was a kid, since I was leading some kid groups. I always loved when someone draws something and some other people are guessing. The only thing that I didn't like is that you have to wait until it's your turn to draw. So I created a game where everyone draws at the same time and then guesses, and it was a little chaotic, especially at the start. So I named it Pictomania. At the back of the box there are pictures, some sample pictures how it works, drawn by my daughters. And it was like, that's great. Pictures of that was drawn by my kids are now being published in Japan and Korea and around the world. It was nice, like, to send their pictures to the world.
You know, Vlaada transitioned very quickly from designing these huge games. One of them, I don't know how much it was covered, Mage Knight. He designed along with Dungeon Petz, by the way, was published at the same year as Dungeon Petz, but different company. The Pictomania was suddenly like the new Vlaada. You know, instead of big crazy games, he wanted to play games and develop games he would play with his children. I think the game turned really nicely, but we did some strategic some really key decisions wrongly, which resulted in the game not being received as it was supposed to. You know, we published it in a big box for big money and too complicated rules, which is, you can say, is one of the features of CG games.
Our decision to use markers with a bit of cloth to be able to erase that actually significantly increased the production costs, because you need to have lamination of the cardboard. Then those markers are not cheap to get here in Europe, and everything then was a bit expensive.
Pictomania, for what it is too complicated, but it's a fun little game. We had a lot of laughs playing it. It's one of those games when you can get really excited about the gameplay.
Yeah. And the premise is awesome. It's a drawing game in which you don't have to draw well. That's just awesome.
And there's so many painful moments when you're trying to figure out if, like, a thing is a lawyer or a judge. It's awesome. It really it's one of those games, you know, which one might think that it's super easy. It's a drawing game, but it has this little special twist to it. You know, I think it's very much what often, like, a lot of CG games have. It's like a little something that makes it a little bit less predictable.
Well, Pictomania is favorite game of our kids. They love the game, so they always kept asking, playing it more and more. They were super happy when we actually decided to publish the second edition.
After we did Codenames, I kind of came with an idea that maybe we would be able to fit Pictomania in that box of code names. And Vlaada came with an idea that, okay, but even reducing cards from 6 to just 3 would be better, because then you do not need to read that many words at the beginning of every round. So it was better. The second edition was definitely better from the production point of view, but also from the design point of view.
Second edition is much better. You should buy it if you have the first one.
It's also very compact. You can almost fit it in your purse, if your purse is big enough. Marketing.
And we were approached by 2 designers, Daniele Tascini and Simone Luciani, with their game, which was Tolkien. Back then they were calling it Mayan Ages, but later we found that it's probably not a good name, because many people then called the game Mayonnaise.
But one of the biggest impacts that Tolkien has had on me as a designer is that I played it when I was designing Euphoria. And at the time, I had never played a game with a tech track before.
We assembled the board, and then we tried to move the gears, and they just didn't work. It was...
Alchemist is one of my favorite games of all time, and the very first time I learned how to play it, it was pretty early in my board gaming hobby adventures, I guess. And just seeing all the boards all set up, and the fact that you have to use an app to use deduction, but there's also a worker placement component to the game, it really blew my mind. And it made me think like, wow, I didn't realize board games could do all of this, right?